Llangolman Farm at Ffynnon Sampson is a place of historical significance in Llangolman, a small village located in Pembrokeshire, Wales. The farm is nestled amidst rolling hills and lush greenery, with the village itself known for its proximity to the Preseli Hills, a range of mountains with significant archaeological sites, including ancient standing stones. Llangolman Farm, dating back to at least 1638, features a 17th and 18th century structure with an older rear wing containing barrel vaulting, a cellar with a freshwater well, and was historically a production centre for various goods. It had previously been the residence of the High Sheriff of Pembrokeshire in 1721 and had also been home to the Griffiths family in the 17th century. The farm was linked to a chilling legend. It was said that the farmhouse is haunted by the spirit of a young girl who, burdened with guilt and remorse from an affair with a monk, drowned herself in the mill pond. This, however, would not be the only unsettling story associated with the farm, as in the 1970s, a grisly crime sent ripples of fear and shock throughout the community. On Tuesday, the 7th of December 1976, the farm was home to siblings Griffith Morris Thomas, known as Griff, and Martha Mary Thomas, known as both Martha and Patti. Griff was 73 years old, whereas his sister was 70. Both Griff and Patti had lived their entire lives on the farm, and in their retirement they continued to live a humble life. They lived frugally on a pension of £30 a week. Neither had ever married, and they had spent time tending to the garden of the farmhouse and visiting the Ridwheelum Chapel. As far as anyone knew, that Tuesday went as normal. However, by the fall of the waning moon, both Patti and Griff would be dead. On Saturday, the 11th of December, the local postman, Gareth Rossiter, arrived at the farm's rear door at approximately 8:45 a.m. He was puzzled to notice that the mail he had previously delivered on Thursday and Friday appeared completely untouched. With both curiosity and concern, Gareth opened the door, which was unlocked, and he saw that the curtains were all closed and the lights still on. He called on the siblings, however, he was met with silence. Advancing further into the farmhouse, he reached the kitchen, where he froze in horror. Griff's charred body was sprawled on the kitchen floor, encircled by scorched cushions. Griff's face was blood-smeared, and he was clad in the tattered remains of a brown scarf and a blue donkey jacket, with a package of cheese from a nearby shop still tucked in his jacket pocket. In the living room of the farmhouse, Gareth found the lifeless body of Patti, sitting on a chair with a blanket over her legs, where her entire face and head, as well as clothes, were covered in blood. The television was switched on and had been overturned, lying at her feet. Gareth swiftly alerted the Dyfed Powys police of his discovery, and an investigation into the siblings' deaths began, with police treating their deaths as a double murder. Griff and Patti were buried together on the 3rd of January 1977 in Ridwheelum Cemetery. The post-mortem examination, carried out by pathologist Owen Williams, reported that Griff had suffered a head injury. However, it was not his cause of death. He had succumbed to injuries sustained from being burned. Patti's cause of death had been attributed to Patti having suffered several blows to the head from a blunt instrument, which resulted in a, quote, depressed fracture of the skull. By late January, the police believed that the deaths of Patti and Griff were the result of a murder-suicide. According to DCI Pat Malloy, in correspondence with the coroner John Johnson, which was leaked to the press, he stated the crime scene at the farmhouse was, quote, indicative of a sudden, unpredictable outburst of violence between the two deceased, further elaborating, quote, I consider that the possibility of a third party being involved is so remote as to lead me to the conclusion that Mr. Thomas killed his sister and died in a fire started by himself. Malloy further stated in his correspondence that a blood-smeared coin purse was discovered atop a dresser in the living room, suggesting it had been handled during the altercation. Griff's fingerprint was the only one found on the purse. It appeared that the pair kept substantial sums of cash at home. The writing area of the bureau in the room where Patti was discovered was left open, and its cash box was empty. However, Malloy noted that £2,637.90 was found elsewhere on the property. Patti's handbag, left on the floor of her bedroom, contained £543 in cash. This suggested to Malloy that robbery was not the motive and no third party had been involved. In opposition to this, however, Malloy's reports included details suggesting a visitor may have been present at Finn and Sampson on the night the siblings died. 2 cups of tea were found on the living room mantelpiece and appeared to have been barely touched. A plate of bread, butter and some crisps was left on a chair near the fireplace with Patti's fingerprints underneath it, indicating she may have brought the food in for a visitor. Malloy concluded that Patti was likely killed with the oak dining chair discovered in the kitchen near the living room door, as one of its legs was covered in her blood. A sewing machine located 3 feet from Griff's head was completely coated with his blood beneath its wooden cover. Malloy speculated about the kind of intruder who would take the time to replace the sewing machine cover. However, there is no mention of Patti's blood on Griff's body. There was a fingerprint stained with blood found on a picture in the living room, along with another blood-stained fingerprint on the cover of the sewing machine. However, both of these left thumbprints have never been identified. It is worth noting that 398 other fingerprints found in the farmhouse were positively identified. Malloy's report, which was criticised by some as being contradictory and rushed, lastly indicated that, while following the possibility that a friend or relative may have wanted to gain financially from the Thomas siblings' deaths, 1,260 people were interviewed by the police. 572 individuals were cleared of any involvement due to having alibis, and 156 statements were collected. Griff and Patti's cousin, Denley Absalom, however, said that both he and his uncle were never questioned about the case. Curiously, Denley told The Guardian a piece of intriguing information which was absent from any reports about Griff and Patti's deaths. Firstly, Denley had heard that mysterious footprints leading away from the farmhouse were seen in the snow outside Finn and Sampson, trailing into the valleys. However, nothing ever came of it. Another baffling detail was that Denley stated that Patti and Griff shared a dog together, who vanished suddenly around the time of their deaths, with rumours circulating the dog had been found alive and well in the farmyard. Denley stated, quote, "It was a sheepdog with eyes different colours, like David Bowie. He wasn't quiet. If you turned up on their farmyard, he would yap and bark. They knew there was somebody about. If you drove past there, you'd see the dog." He concluded, quote, "It seems unusual that the dog just disappeared." The inquest into their deaths concluded on the 17th of February and reported that Griff had committed manslaughter and had unlawfully killed Patti, with Malloy's report stating Griff had lifted a chair over his head and beat his sister to death with it. An open verdict was reached for the death of Griff. To many, it seemed an open and shut case of murder-suicide. Locals and loved ones of the deceased, however, were convinced that this was not the case. Griff had rheumatoid arthritis, and because of this, as well as his lifelong bond with his sister and his strong religious views, many believed it was impossible to imagine that the 73-year-old would murder Patti, the latter of whom many locals knew as the one who ruled the roost and was notably a no-nonsense individual. It was said by friends that Griff would struggle to do basic tasks, particularly with his left hand, such as turning a page in the Bible at church or lifting a hay bale. Therefore, the idea of him being capable of killing his own sister seemed unfathomable. For decades, the case lay dormant. Police believe it to be a closed case, yet family, friends, and locals believed that a third party had been involved. In 2011, forensic psychologist Dr. Clive Sims believed that serial killer John Cooper could have been responsible for killing Griff and Patti Thomas. Cooper was found guilty of murdering 4 people in Pembrokeshire: siblings Richard and Helen Thomas in Milford Haven in 1985, and couple Peter and Gwenda Dixon on a coastal path in 1989. Dr. Sims stated, quote, "It's quite probable that he would have been offending earlier. It would be extremely unusual for someone to start that late in life on a criminal career, and to start with that level of violence." Cooper has not been ruled out as a suspect, as at the time of Patti and Griff's passing, Cooper resided in Jordanston, close to Nayland, where he had been engaging in fencing duties near their residence. Detectives looking into the Cooper links are also investigating whether there is a link between these crimes and the deaths of Harry and Meghan Toos, who were murdered at their Llanharry farmhouse near the town of Bridgend in 1993. It was reported in April of 2022, over 46 years after the Thomas siblings' deaths, a community newspaper in Cleibran began a campaign for a new probe, stating, quote, "There is a glimmer of hope that evidence can be found that will prove the belief of everyone who knew the brother and sister that they had not attacked each other." The Cleibran newspaper continues the campaign to try to clear Griff Thomas's name of murdering his sister, insisting that sufficient attention was not given to the probable theory that there was a third person responsible for the crime. The South Wales Argus reported in 2022 that the previous year, fresh evidence surfaced suggesting that Patti was engaged in a conflict with a woman in Haverfordwest shortly before her passing. In late November 1976, Patti's cousin, Sarah Mary Luke, encountered her outside Auchie White's and discovered her in a state of distress, according to Sarah's daughter, Sandra Jellicoe. It was alleged that the woman clearly expressed her desire for Griff and Patti to leave Finn and Sampson so she could purchase the property. This also fueled the Cleibran newspaper's campaign to have the case reopened. Emir Phillips, who personally knew Griff and Patti, stated to BBC News that their deaths, quote, "shattered the peace of the area." He stated in regards to the inquest's findings, quote, "That was an impossibility for Griff to do that because he was a very fine man, quietly spoken. I never saw him in any fury at all. Being a murderer does not fit his character at all, and I think that it is time that the police force checks what evidence they still have." A vigil was held for Griff and Patti at Ridwheelum Chapel, where the Reverend Peter Thomas recalled, quote, "fond memories of their kindness and devotion and their simple way of life." He said that the siblings' deaths had, quote, "created a mystery," and further stated that he believed there were, quote, "questions that still haven't been answered." BBC News reported that Senedd for Preseli Pembrokeshire member Paul Davis said that Patti and Griff's passing had left, quote, "a dark cloud hanging over the community," and was of the strong belief that the case should be looked over and re-examined. Davis stated, quote, "The police should look at this because technology has moved forward. We now have DNA profiling, for example, so that's why it's absolutely essential that police reconsider this case." A Dyfed Powys police spokesperson said, quote, "Significant developments have been seen in forensic science over the last 40 years, which may provide additional information even in cases of this age. While the investigation at the time, 1976, was thorough, the forensic science was limited compared with today, and we will explore whether modern techniques can shed further light on the events at Finn and Sampson in 1976. We are continuing to identify and confirm what material has been retained. The family will be kept informed of any developments." As of 2024, the case of Griff and Patti Thomas remains unresolved.